Okay, guys. So it seems we are finally connected, and it's very nice to see you. Just write me anything in chat and let me know if you can see me, hear me, and things like that. And we have the bells ringing for this occasion as well. Perfect. Okay, okay. Great, this is a relief. Sorry for this unexpected delay. So let us start, let us proceed. It's very nice to hear you. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to be talking about applications to business schools. We will be using English for this webinar. So in case English is not okay with you, we asked in the very beginning, but I see we have new people joining. Just let me know, okay? And we could try to figure out something. But we have attendees from quite a few countries, okay? So it might be one of the most convenient languages to use for us. So let us start. We're going to be talking about the topics that you can hopefully now see on your webinar screens, which is the preparation of the application package, the documents that you need to submit to the business schools. And we have the subtitle, which you can see, that says why in fall it's already late to get into the whole process of application preparation. The thing is that there are several reasons why now is the best time to start your application. And we will try to cover all of them as comprehensively as possible due to our limited time, okay? If you have any problems hearing me or seeing me, let me know, and I will be looking at the chat window meanwhile. Now I will ask Nastya, who is with us, who is the moderator, who many of you have seen. She introduced me in the very beginning. I will ask her to change to our first slide, and let's see if it works. Perfect. Okay, so this is something Nastya was supposed to do, but we are not playing with computers anymore. We let you wait for too long anyway, so I will have to introduce myself, which I normally don't do, okay? So I'm Irina Shivalova. I'm a senior application consultant with MBA Strategy, have been with us for quite a few years. I'm also a member of IGAC, which is Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. I always forget one of these words, and then the abbreviation doesn't really work, so I have to be looking on the slide as well. So I have been working over the course of these years with quite a few guys doing all sorts of programs, okay? We had a question from one of the participants if we are going to be covering the executive MBA application process, okay? If any of you present now here wants to know more about different sorts of programs, okay, like masters, specific types of masters like LLM maybe, okay? Or executive MBAs or things like that, PhDs, can you please type it Well, the NIST scoring is not so far from truth, in fact, because we had to move to a different laptop. We are using a different connection, which might be a little tricky, but let's hope it's not going to happen again. So, Nastya, could you please move us to the next slide? Because I would like to start talking about the process that we are so interested in. Okay, so the first thing, the first part of our talk is about what different paths you can take on your way to the MBA, because different schools use different strategy in admitting the applicants, okay? So you see the path of the samurai, and samurais in this case are you. By the way, thanks for writing down. I'm looking at the programs that you're interested in. So first of all, we have some programs that use set admission deadlines. And in this case, this is our first bullet point, which is first deadlines, okay? So if you will be aiming at applying to, let's say, Stanford, Harvard, London Business School, those are some of the very many schools that actually use this process, set admission deadlines. And I will say a couple of words about it in more detail in just a moment. The other type of schools are using rolling admissions. Rolling admissions means that the documents are being accepted all year long, but there are some intermediate deadlines when schools actually review their applications, or sometimes they set a certain amount of time that it will take them to look at your documents. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, up to 6 weeks, in case with, for instance, Columbia, who practice this rolling admissions process. Some of the other schools who do this are, for instance, Instituto de Empresa, a Spanish school that you might have heard that. I mean, they're very good. They have very good standing in Financial Times MBA rankings. Or, for instance, IMD, another famous school from Switzerland. And another option you might have, which is probably not the best one for you, but you might have heard about it and it's good to know, is winter intakes. Okay, so most schools accept and collect one MBA class per year, which starts mostly in fall. A number of schools does 2 classes per year, and those classes in many cases graduate simultaneously. So it doesn't mean that you will graduate later than your fall MBA class, okay? Those classes start in January, and the difference is that mostly you have to study throughout the summer. I will speak about that in just a moment. Nastya, could you please move us to the next slide? So the winter intake, which I already started talking about. So who is it good for? Just for you to know. Because you will use your summer not for internships and not for vacations, as is the case with schools and programs who start in fall, you will use your summer for studying. Sounds like a lot of fun, I know, but sometimes you can use this winter intake despite this slight disadvantage to catch up. For instance, I am now working with a client who has independently applied in 3rd round, so last moment application, okay, to the school with set deadlines. He didn't make it, and set deadlines have certain disadvantages. I will say a couple of words about that. But now, only 2 months later, he is actually reapplying to the same school for the winter intake, and he is reapplying in the 1st round, so in the very beginning of the application process. So you can learn a little bit more about that, and also take a look at what your needs are. I mean, some people are in desperate need of internships, okay? They want to get some experience abroad. I know that some of you probably want to take MBAs and maybe look into continuing your careers abroad, right? Finding a job there, it's understandable, okay? In this case, winter intake might not be the best option, but if you are an entrepreneur, for instance, this might be a good thing to do. Nastya, can we please move to the next slide? Okay, so this is just a little example of how winter intakes might work. So this is INSEAD, one of the leading, I would say probably the leading European school right now. Their MBA, full-time MBA program is quite famous. And here you see how the winter intake process is structured. So you have several deadlines. There are 4 application rounds and several deadlines in order to get into INSEAD for the winter intake. Nastya, let's look at the next one. So the next one that I've already been talking about is rolling admissions. I've mentioned Columbia uses it, IMD uses it, IE uses it. So what happens You apply at any point, almost any point during the year. Okay, schools recommend they do it at least half a year before your intended program starts. Okay, it takes the school around 4 to 8 weeks normally to review your application. And this is also very convenient in terms of planning your time. Okay, so for instance, if you are not getting into a certain program because the deadlines for it, the set regular deadlines, have passed, you can look at another program which has a rolling application process. For instance, okay, let's take IMD. Nastya, can we see the next slide, please? Because IMD has a number of what I call intermediary deadlines throughout the year. You can see it's February, April, June, August. September, in this case, is the last deadline, whereas for many schools with set deadlines, it's actually the first one. So as you see, it enables you to juggle your time around and be flexible while preparing your applications. And while Nastya moves us to the next slide, just a couple of words, because I know that many of you probably already have the schools they intend to apply to. I mean, maybe you've chosen the program that looks best to use, it suits best to your needs. But in fact, I always advise my clients to have at least one safe choice. And if you are applying to top tier school, such as Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, among the American ones, INSEAD, IMD in Europe, LBS as well, it's always advisable to try and apply to at least 3 or 4 schools, because as you understand, your chances might not be as high. Set deadlines. They provide you with a variety of options. Excuse me. So first of all, set deadlines mean that, okay, they are plural. It means there is no one deadline for such programs. Some masters have this system, but MBAs always have at least several deadlines that you can be following. The first deadline, the first round of application, let's say, for most schools, is around September or October, and we will look at examples just in a moment. There are certain advantages to applying in the first round. Okay, many people ask me why schools do rounds, and this is the answer. So if you apply in the first round, you show school your high motivation, first of all, and second, your good organization skills. Why? Exactly because it means that over the summer and over the course of the previous year, you have already put a lot of effort and time into passing your tests. Maybe some of you are already doing it, and you must know then that it's a lot of fun, right? Quote unquote fun. Tests, a bunch of documents you have to prepare, and we will proceed to talk about that. So many things to do, and if the school sees that you have been able to actually do all those things before the very first deadline, before September, let's say, that's a good thing for you. So in every round of application, a school accepts a certain number of people. And some schools like INSEAD, for instance, for many years now, have been balancing out the amount of applications, the percentage of them that they accept in every round. So let's say they will take 30% of the class, or 33.3% of the class in the first round, do the same in second, third. But actually, okay, INSEAD has 4 rounds, so it's 25%. Some schools do it differently, and the problem is that some of them leave only a very tiny percentage of places in the class unfilled until the very last deadline. So imagine they can be taking 30%, and then the last intake, it can be only 10%. So anyways, the further you get towards the end of the application process for any given school, the less chances you have to get in. Why? So on the one hand, you can have this factor of the wild card playing for you. What I mean is that schools are looking at so-called factor of diversity in their classes, which means that they want not only to take brilliant people, they want to take people from different backgrounds. They want to take people who have done different things in their lives, come from different cultures, okay? This is diversity. It's an important component of success of any given top tier MBA class right now. And if, for instance, they have already accepted, you're applying in the last deadline, and they have already accepted, let's say, I don't know, 5 people from Georgia, and maybe this is as many people from Georgia as they want to take. then you might have a problem. Only because you're coming from Georgia and they want diversity in their class, they might actually say, sorry, but not this time. Okay, so the early year you apply in the application process, which is actually September, October for most schools, as I've said, the more you boost up your chances of actually getting in. So let's look at some concrete dates and facts. Nastya, can we please move to the next slide? Thank you. So Harvard, okay. Quite a few of you might have been considering Harvard. I mean, I'm always working with the guys who want to get in, sometimes do get in, okay, because Harvard is a tough choice. But let's look at how the application process works. So we see there are 3 rounds of applications. The first one is quite early on. It's early September, September 9th. Also take a look at how much time it takes for the school to review the applications. If you apply in September, you will only hear from the school in mid-December. What it means is that, for instance, if you want to try a really tough school and maybe you're not ready to apply to several schools at one time, you can try filing your application to the toughest school in the first round and then quickly trying to reapply if you don't get in. In the second round, you will have time. Not to the same school, of course, right? We are talking about trying a different school. For most schools, second round will be more or less like what we see in Harvard's case. So it will be January or maybe early February in some cases. Nastya, let's look at the different schools. So next slide. Stanford. Okay, as we see, for Stanford, for instance, the first deadline already is quite later. It's the 1st of October. So for instance, you have to keep this date in mind because if you, for instance, aim for Stanford, you have 1 month more to prepare all your documents than if you were aiming for Harvard. Other than that, 3 application rounds, so fall, winter, and spring, more or less standard. Let's look at the next slide, please. Okay, this is a class profiles, and this is something that I want you just to look at briefly because this has to do with the factor of diversity that we've been talking about. Okay, so totally Harvard, which is a statistics of 2013 class, but it didn't change that much, so that's we will be looking on it. Around 1,000 people in the class. Okay, INSEAD has slightly more. It's 1,000 something. As you see, the number of applications filed is around 9,000. So what you have to actually do when applying to Harvard is in fact prove why you and not the other 9,133 people deserve a place in class. Okay, so you have to prove why you are better than the other, or whatever number of people applying. Okay, 12% admitted. For some schools, it can be even lower. Some schools, in fact, have a very small number size of MBA class. For instance, IMD, the Swiss school that I've already mentioned, only accepts 90 people every year compared to 900 at Harvard, okay? But it doesn't mean that it's easier to get there than to get into Harvard or vice versa, okay? Look at the stats about the applicants. So you see that the age range is quite big, 24 to 37 years. We have people of different age range here, I'm sure, and some of you might fall within the standard of MBA applicants, which is more or less 25 to 28 years. If you are younger or older, it does not mean you will not get in. You see there's a 37 years old person in a full-time class. This is full-time statistics. But it does mean that you have to explain in your application package why in the world you need a full-time MBA at this stage of your career. But again, it's not impossible. First of all, look at the statistics that schools provide. Again, for instance, INSEAD tends to have a slightly older full-time MBA class than some other schools, while Harvard is looking for younger applicants, and they have a special Harvard 1+1 program for that. Again, your Gmat scores, as you see here, they range from 600 to 780, okay? 600 is what I consider the low Gmat, and I always tell my guys, you know what, go and take Gmat again. If you have 600, you probably shouldn't be aiming to Harvard, but hey, Maybe I'm wrong. See, there is someone with 600 in it, but you have to be really, really outstanding and brilliant in order to make it. Let's move on, Master. So Harvard, London Business School, this is Stanford. Okay, so in Stanford, they also have some interesting statistics. You can see how many international students, for instance, are accepted to Stanford. And it's not such a big number. I mean, it's only around 40% of the class, which again, slightly lowers your chances to get in. The average age is also quite interesting, and take a look at TOEFL scores, okay? Because, okay, with the tests, if you've started on it, you already know. If not, this will be useful. Quite a few schools do not set a strict borderline, okay? How much you have to get on Gmat or TOEFL or IELTS in order to get into a certain school. Some do. Okay, for Harvard, there's a certain number. For INSEAD, there is a certain number. It's 105 and 109, respectively, if I'm not mistaken. But for most schools, there is a certain range. So if you demonstrate the knowledge, you're good. But again, here, always look at the statistics, because if you see what is the average in the class, you probably shouldn't want to fall beyond that average, lower than that. Let's move to the next slide, please. Which in this case is, okay, the application components. So I've been telling you about the timeline or time frame of what you will have to do, when you do what. Here is what you exactly have to do before you hopefully get in to the programs that you are looking at. Another little mention, because we also have some people present here at the webinar today who are interested in executive programs. Just a couple of words about that. So the application process, in terms of its components, will be quite similar for you. Okay, so what we will be talking about now will be quite similar, but some executive MBA programs, most of them, do operate on the basis of set deadlines, just as the regular MBA programs do, full-time ones, okay? Some of them, again, also do rolling admissions. So everything I've said about the deadlines and the importance of applying early also has to do with executive programs as well as full-time ones. Regarding the application components. So these are the basics. I mean, they might vary a little bit, the list that you see on the screen, from one school and program to the other, but mostly they will stay more or less the same, okay? So the differences might be, for instance, IMD, this was school I've mentioned, don't ask for your resume. Why? Because they have an online application form, as the absolute majority of business schools have today. And in that online application form, you will actually give very, very detailed information about your employment, about your achievements at each position. So this is something that actually you will have to do instead of your resume. So such little varieties do exist. But mostly we are looking at your transcript, which means your translated diploma, your GPA, the average of your, let's say, level of performance at a given school that you will have to submit. Most schools will accept just a simple translation. They don't ask for the what they call official transcript, which is everything, you know, wet stamp, signature, things like that, until you will actually be accepted. So no worries about that, but please check what you have to submit beforehand. For instance, I had a case when a client of mine who was at that point working in Moscow had to fly to Siberia to quite a small university to which he went in order to obtain a transcript. And it took him a lot of time. So one reason to plan in advance and start thinking of it now. Another thing, okay, your resume. In a sense, it's a mirror of your whole profile of what you want to show to the school, right? And there are certain things that you might actually want to add to your resume. And you still have time to do that, in, as unbelievable as that sounds, I know, in a couple of months, in fact, or maybe slightly longer if you plan to apply, let's say, in second round. Yep, and you can be submitting your questions just as Denise does right now, and we will get to them during our Q&A session in the end. So the transcript is one thing. The resume is the mirror, what to add to it. So one thing is that schools nowadays do value greatly your extracurricular involvement. Why? Because, okay, MBA has become a terribly global brand lately. I don't mean just a certain school, but the trend of applying to MBA in order to boost your career has become something which has spread worldwide, and people are doing it. And this means the schools, especially top schools, are getting a lot of applications from people who are brilliant professionally, who might have had a good academic record, who come from a variety of backgrounds. But the schools cannot afford to look only at their professional and academic performance anymore. Exactly because they want to choose the best ones. They want to know what each person does or thinks or values or what is on their mind, except for their professional or academic achievements. Okay, so that's why they will be looking closely into your extracurricular and especially social activities. Okay, so charity, sports, arts, whatever you might imagine, it can benefit very much your profile as a whole. So this is something that you might want to start doing, for instance, okay? I mean, the school will see that you haven't been doing it for ages, but okay, maybe you've been playing piano when you were, I don't know, in 10th grade of high school. You might want to go back to it now and enter an amateur piano competition, and it might give you a story to tell. Okay, so think about those things and about your resume, how it will look. Test scores. Okay, let's actually proceed to the test scores as we will speak. Nastya, can you see the next slide, please? Okay, so familiar things, I hope. If not, it's time to familiarize yourself with them. For one thing, because it will not take you a very short time to prepare for your tests and to pass them, okay? Usually it takes about 2 months in the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, I had a client who did not file his application, although we had it ready for 1 year. I mean, he spent 1 year preparing for his Gmat because he was applying to London Business School and they wanted a good Gmat score, and he knew he could do it better, but of course he was being delayed by his work, by everything. So it took him 1 year to file his application. But when he got his desired score, when he filed his application, Nikolai is now in the LBS MBA program. Okay, so it's a great thing. Just a couple of things regarding transcripts. I will answer it fast because I mean I see that people have quite a few questions. So you calculate the GPA based on the 4-point score. Okay, all schools universally accepted. So 4.0 is the highest GPA you can have. That's why in order, if you have the ABCD system, for instance, or if you have 100-point system or any other system, you will have to transform it into the 4.0. For instance, I mean, when people in my department, in application department at MBA Strategy, work with transcripts, that's what they do, okay? So you have to do some calculations, and also it matters, of course, how many hours of every class you had, but you can also find this information online. I mean, how to do your GPA, and you should be good. Okay, so test scores. TOEFL, IELTS, for non-native speakers, mostly a must, unless you have been studying in a university abroad, and maybe you spent 1 year studying there, in which cases most schools will give you a waiver. They will say, okay, no problem, we know your English is good. In other cases, there might be or might not be a certain level or certain score you have to achieve. Always check it. This is one of the first things to check on the profile of your desired school and program. And then plan your time, because test preparation does take a lot of time. Gmat and GRE is another test that is almost universally required by MBA programs, okay? Full-time MBAs do it in 99% of cases. Believe me, I don't know over the years of my work a single worthy MBA program, a good one, that would not require a Gmat or GRE. Okay, GRE is something similar to Gmat. I will not talk much about it, but it's a type of test that you have to pass as well. And sometimes quite a few schools actually start doing it now. Sometimes you can submit your GRE instead of your Gmat. Okay, and as a person who passed GRE and who knows quite a bit about Gmat, I can tell you that GRE for many people, especially those with good verbal skills, but maybe not such good quantitative skills, might be considered actually easier. So look into both tests and look which one your school accepts, especially if you have not started your preparation yet. And for many people, I must tell you, Gmat preparation and getting a necessary score, which, okay, varies for different schools, but I would say on average for a good school, it should be at least around 680 and up. 700 and up puts you into a good place, okay? You have a good standing in the eyes of the admission committee. Another thing, let's move on, Master, if you can please show us the next slide. Okay, so the process of how we work on the documents and how you will work on the documents. So this scheme that you see applies to two very basic and very important components of your application package. Okay, so we talked about transcript, test scores, CV. Two things, important things that we have left are essays and reference letters. Okay, something that again hopefully keeps you worried, because if not, it should. This is not something done in the last moment thing. Okay, so but just before I say this, I want to mention a couple of words about the online application form. Okay, as I said, with most schools you apply online. Okay, so you upload all your stuff online, and this is how you apply. Some schools might require your reference letters to be mailed. UK schools still have this tendency, okay? In the US and in most of Europe, you don't need to do that, okay? But application form is also something to start with, because, okay, sometimes you go on the website of a university that is of interest for you, okay? And you look at the application documents that they need, and you see, wow, they don't need any essays from me. They only ask for reference letters and you know, fill in online application and stuff like that. And you're very happy, and you say, okay, I will do it 1 week before, you know, the deadline. And then you go, you enter the application form, and suddenly you see that there are, well, application form questions, but they look more like essays. And the amount of things you can write in them is actually quite significant. And then, you know, panic, people coming to me 5 days before deadline and saying, Irina, I need help with it. That's how it happens, okay? So start working on your application form quite early. Essays and references basically are the core part of your application. And one of the reasons why you have to start working on them early, as I do suggest very, very strongly, okay? I'm trying to persuade you to do that because I know what happens if you don't. One main reason is that brainstorming for your essays, thinking what you will put into them, might take you much more time than actually writing them. And even when you get to writing them, I mean, there are a lot of little tricks and tweaks that you have to know in order to prepare your documents. So, I mean, if you decide, if you intend to write your own documents yourself, which is a great thing, please start doing it in advance, start thinking about them in advance, reading literature, reading on how to write academic essays. I mean, you will have a chance to practice it a little bit in course of your IELTS or TOEFL or Gmat as well, but those are slightly different types of essays. And your MBA essays should be very much saturated with facts, interesting details, the story you want to tell. They should all fit together very well so that the school sees a holistic picture of who you are as a candidate, okay? For the reference letter, I mean, okay, they are supposedly to be written by your referees. And the choice of referees is also quite an important thing, okay? So most schools require you to submit a reference from your current supervisor, plus the reference from your former supervisor, or one of such. I mean, some schools also accept peer recommendations, which means it would be a person who is, in fact, working at the same level as you. You don't supervise each other, okay, in any form. You are not subordinate. You are not, okay, same level. But this is a person who might tell interesting stories about you. And this is a common misconception, okay, about the references. You know how we write references, or how people used to write them for us, at least for me. Okay, my university reference would probably look, I mean, if my supervisor wrote it himself, just like Irina is an excellent student, she has shown great diligence in her studies, and please accept her into the program, I recommend her strongly. This does not work, okay? I mean, the reference I would get, for instance, from my US academic supervisor would look very different. He would tell concrete stories, he would tell how I have demonstrated academic excellence, diligence, all that stuff. So prepare yourself to the fact that your referees might not actually want to write this great amount of things themselves, especially that every school has a set template. Okay, well, almost every school has a set template for your reference letters, which means your referees will have to answer concrete questions like, what are the strong sides of this applicant? What are the weak sides of this applicant? And they will have to tell stories, and that takes a lot of time and quite a bit of writing, okay? So, I mean, in any case, prepare your referees for what they are to go through. That's one thing. And besides, you might need to write it yourself. Be ready for that, because it also takes time. And also, I mean, the schedule of your referees is crucially important, because, I mean, they can go on vacation in September when you will need them to submit those letters. So one reason, again, to plan in advance. As for the essays, okay, so before we will move on, and we will talk about very briefly about different topics of essays that exist, because I do think that essays are really the very heart of your application. This is a chance for you to show that you are better than everyone else. The best place to do it is in your essays, so never underestimate them. They are crucially important. So how you can work on them. So this is a scheme of how I, for instance, work with my clients on the process, okay? But it might be very helpful for you to see these different stages of what you do and how you arrive at the final document. So first of all, the brainstorming stage. You have to think about examples. You have to think about the stories you have to tell, about the strategy as well, okay? Next thing is, you make a draft of sorts, okay? You put your ideas down and you start shaping them. And okay, I mean, with my clients, I do it in 2 drafts, mostly. I mean, more or less it's enough. I mean, come on, I've been writing essays for quite a few years now, okay? So for most people, 2 drafts will not be enough. I tell you from my experience. I mean, it can be 4, 5 drafts, a lot of time on that, plan accordingly. Think about structure, logic, and about explicating your points, okay? You know what points you want to make, but think about how you will explain them, how you will give details about them. Then, of course, the interesting details you would like to add. Then, of course, ideally, there should be someone else to look through your essays and give you their feedback regarding your English, if it's a concern, or regarding the stories you tell. I mean, ideally, if you have a friend who has been through the MBA application process, he can do that, okay? Or, I mean, a consultant can do that. Or someone else, whoever you find who is competent enough and willing to do it. That should be great help. Finally, your ideal essay should have what you see in this last little box, okay, on the right side of the screen, which is it should answer all the questions that school asks you, because sometimes you see one essay, but it can actually contain 3 or 4 questions, okay? Then, good examples. The stories that will be remembered by the admissions committee, because otherwise you just are a part of this little mass of people, okay, gray mass, and you cannot stand out. If you cannot stand out, there are little chances that you will be accepted. And finally, it should be personalized. It should be yours. This is something you will have to talk about on your interview, which is usually the next step, okay, after you submit your whole application package and you get your answer. Remember, we looked at Harvard. So you apply in early September, mid-December, you get a reply, but it's not a reply that says, hooray, you're in. No way. You will not know until spring. Why? Exactly because you will have to pass an interview. And an interview is, again, a very serious stage. Quite a few people are left out after the interview. So remember, what you write about in your package is what you will have to talk about on the interview. Many people ask me, okay, can I fantasize a little bit? Can I add something here and something there and make it all sweet and nice? You can try to make yourself look better than you actually look. And there is nothing wrong in presenting things in a certain way. But don't make things up exactly because you will have to talk about it. And when a person is under stress, there's very little chance that they can to talk about it without being obviously lying, unfortunately. So I tell you, don't lie, don't make things up. I mean, really don't. And let's move to the next slide. For those of you writing questions, we will try to go back to them, and I will try as much as possible to answer all of them. And if not, on my second slide, I had my email address. I will type it again for you now in the chat window, and you will be able to send your questions, the ones we might not have time to answer now, for instance, or I don't know, I might accidentally skip, to this email address. Okay, and please feel free to do that. That's important. That's shuvalova@mbastrategy.ua. And now, while you're writing this down, you should be also looking at one of our last slides for today, which has the information about the essays. And here we have Harvard essays. Okay, Harvard Business School, a very popular choice. We can see here how the topics and the size of the essays as well, actually, change throughout the years. So imagine, the first set we have is for the application season 2011-2012. We have 4 essays, which, I mean, amount to quite a considerable number of characters or words. And Americans mostly count in words. So here you have, in fact, 2,000 words to write in your essays. That's quite a lot. That's a couple of pages of very scrupulous and very concentrated writing. The topics are fairly typical, I would say. Quite a few schools use this question. So, your accomplishments, your setbacks, why an MBA, and let's say an open topic, answer a question you wish we'd ask. However, as you go on, you can see that there are other changes coming up. 2012-2013, okay, we see 2 essays only. And this year, in fact, we have only 1 essay. Okay, so last year the school was asking, tell us something you did well and tell us something you had done better, which is basically, as you see, the same question as those accomplishments and setbacks, but only in a very cut down and concentrated version. Not 3 stories, but 1 story plus 1 story, that's it. This year, Harvard actually tells you, okay, tell us whatever you want, which is probably the hardest question you have to answer, okay? I mean, some people say, oh, just 1 essay for Harvard, cool, I'm gonna try and apply. Good thing, but you will spend so much time brainstorming that actually you could have written another whole application package with many essays during that time. I mean, think about it. 1 essay, 2 essays doesn't mean you will spend less time on your application. So again, summing up, think in advance, plan in advance. Your test scores, your test prep process will take a lot of time for you. Get in touch with your referees, talk to them, get some ideas from them, show them what they will have to do, what the questions are. Do they want to make their input? Are they going to live on vacation and go to Cambodia, okay, and have no cell phone access there, which is actually a real story that happened to my client. It was a very troublesome situation. Next thing, your resume, whatever you want to add to it, some extra activities you want to take up, think about that. And finally, also your essays, a very, very important thing. Transcripts as well, securing them, but essays most of all, thinking about them, talking to other people, gathering ideas, because brainstorming does not only mean you think about something yourself or you talk to your consultant, let's say. It also means that you can get great ideas from talking to your friends, family, relatives, people you know, colleagues, whoever can contribute to that process productively. And Nastya, can we please move on to our last slide, in fact. Okay, so I don't know what you mean. That's how I call this slide, or Q&A. So now I can actually answer your questions. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you got a very concentrated and I realized large amount of information, but I really will be happy to clarify it further for you, whether in letters. And please, if you have an extended question, it's best to write me a letter or sign up for a free consulting session with me, which you can do on our website, or do anything of that sort, okay? Because if we need to talk, it's better than we do it outside of this very short time that we have here. Now, let's take a look. So, what do we have? I think I've talked a little bit about the issue with the transcript. I mean, in reality, you can never have an exact answer of how does this or that system correspond to my needs. How exactly do I transcribe my transcript? Because there are so many different issues. You know what? If you have a trouble, if you really don't know what to do, ask your school. I mean, really call them and ask them. That's the best thing to do. In addition to that, what else do we have? Should I write down in my CV that I have a PhD in physics? Okay. Did your PhD in physics help to shape you as a person? Why did you do a PhD in physics? If it's a part of your life story, or specifically of the stories you want to tell to the school, I say yes, do it, definitely do it. I mean, it's definitely worth it in such case. Okay, TOEFL. Why schools demand TOEFL after 650 Gmat score? Great question, no idea. I mean, to be honest, if you have high Gmat with good verbal percentage, ideally they shouldn't, but okay. Test companies should also earn money. So, you know, think about it from that point of view, especially the TOEFL and Gmat are done by the competing companies. So maybe it also gives you some idea. Okay. So yeah, anyways, if you have any more questions, type them very fast. Okay, I will try to answer them. If not, again, you can get all these answers from me. I mean, call MBA Strategy, whatever, go to our website, sign up for consultancies, write me a letter, okay, I answer them. And yeah, it was very nice having you here, listening to me, being very patient about all the tech problems that we have. And I hope you all have a very good day, night, evening, however you classify it. And maybe Nastya will turn me off now and say a couple of words just to wrap this whole thing up.